This video was sponsored by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform to help you build your online presence, complete with tools for online stores, marketing, and analytics. When it comes to gimbals, I've always found them to be quite tricky things to review because all of the gimbals serve practically the same purpose. They all stabilize your camera. So today, although I am reviewing another gimbal, let's focus more on how this gimbal is different from most other gimbals. This is the Zhiyun Crane 3 Lab, and simply by the looks of it, it does seem quite a bit different from your typical gimbal. The ergonomics of the Crane 3 Lab, I would describe it as being wildly different because instead of having the cameras and the servos being stuck on a long pole containing the batteries and also serving as the handle for this gimbal is behind the camera when the camera is docked, and when you pick it up, it goes straight into underslung mode, meaning the handle is on top. And I would say that operating it this way does put a lot less strain on your wrist, especially since the payload of this gimbal is about 4.5 kilos, so you can load this thing up quite a bit. But to first answer the question, is this an effective gimbal in terms of actually stabilizing the camera? Yes, it is. It is actually a very steady gimbal. But if you want a more traditional gimbal experience, you can actually collapse the tripod base, which is also removable, and use that as the handle. And when you're operating it in this mode, the location of the joystick controller actually starts to make quite a bit more sense. If not, it just kind of looks very awkwardly placed at the base of the gimbal. So you can use this controller to point the gimbal around in certain modes, and the focusing knob is also right here. The only downside to operating it upright like this is it does feel a tad top heavy and the top handle is kind of in your face. So the Crane 3 Lab is quite clearly designed and optimized to be used in the underslung mode. In fact, when you remove the tripod base, the gimbal has next to no bulk when you are operating it underslung like this. There's no sticky out bits for you to kick into or bump into things, and it's really low profile. I really do think this design is brilliant. So in this configuration, there is barely a body to the gimbal, so you might be wondering where are the batteries hidden. The three 18650 batteries that are powering this gimbal are neatly tucked in right here. And the way the handle on this gimbal is designed, it does certainly remind me of an airline pilot's sight stick. And what's cool about this design is there are so many controls on the handle and they're all within reach of your operating hand. And when you hook up your camera to the gimbal using one of the USB cables that they have provided, and they have provided just about every single USB cable you might possibly need for this purpose in a nice little dedicated case just for cables. Anyways, once you've hooked up the camera, you can change your exposure settings right here from the gimbal. There are dedicated shutter speed, aperture, and ISO buttons on the handle, and once you press on one of those, you just rotate a dial on the back of the handle to change its value, and it does actually feel as natural as changing the settings on the camera itself. And of course, there's a button for you to start video recording as well, and the center button here actually functions as a shutter button that you can even half press to run autofocus. And speaking of dedicated buttons, I think the second thing about the Crane 3 Lab that makes it different from most other gimbals is how it has dedicated buttons for switching following modes. So that totally removes the guesswork, because typically on gimbals you would have to memorize certain combinations of button presses to activate different following modes. On the Crane 3 Lab, there is a labeled button for every mode. Simple as that. With one exception, Vortex mode doesn't have its own dedicated button. Vortex mode is the mode that spins your camera round and round like this. For this mode, you have to double press the POV button to activate it, but there's also a dedicated reset button that resets the gimbal to its neutral position with one click, so this is easily my most used and favorite button on this gimbal. But the pan follow and locking mode buttons are a bit oddly located behind the main body of the gimbal. They are right here, which might make them a bit hard to reach during operation, or at least you'll have to feel your way around them. It's definitely something that you can get used to, but I just found their placement a bit far away from most of the other buttons. Before I move on to answer the question as to why is there an HDMI input on this gimbal, I would like to thank Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Now, you have probably already heard of them before, and just like gimbals, which were designed to make stabilizing your camera easier, Squarespace makes setting up websites easier. That website could be a portfolio or even a full-fledged online store. As somebody who has previously set up a website before the hard way, I can say that Squarespace really does cut the hassle and takes care of everything for you throughout the process of setting up your online presence. They take care of stuff like domain names, hosting, and search engine optimization, so you don't have to worry about them. And designing a professional looking website with Squarespace is also super easy with their user-friendly website builder. They've even got features like providing detailed analytics about your site, appointment scheduling, and even tools for e-commerce. Head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you are ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/zproductions to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So, about that HDMI input, another thing I find to be quite unique on the Crane 3 Lab is how it has wireless video transmission built into the gimbal. Now, I don't think that this is a feature that we are going to find on a whole lot of gimbals, because typically we would have to resort to our camera's wireless companion app or invest in a wireless video transmission system if you wish to see a wireless preview off of your camera that's being flown on a gimbal. The gimbal comes with a nice short micro to micro and also a micro to HDMI cable that you can use to send the feed from your camera to the gimbal. Wrong way round. Wrong way again? And when you connect the gimbal using the gimbal's companion app called ZY Play, and I swear I have nothing to do with this, it just so happens that my name and Zhiyun's company name share the exact same initials, there's really no need to play with me. But once that's done, in the app you get to wirelessly preview the feed out of your camera. And as you can see, it does work, but not quite spectacularly. The quality of the feed is quite heavily compressed, and there is a noticeable amount of delay. Now, as a framing preview, it's really quite alright, but I'd say it borderlines on being just good enough for judging focus on. And speaking of pulling focus on this gimbal, another thing that's quite different about the Crane 3 Lab is the sheer number of accessories that are available for it. Now, most of the accessories are optional purchases, but there are a few configurations starting with the basic gimbal kit. So that will only come with the essentials like the carrying case, the gimbal itself, the batteries, the tripod base, and the cables. The one I have here is called the Creator Kit, and it comes with a phone holder, a camera belt, a set of focus motors with lens gears, a set of quick release mounts, a quick release plate for the belt, and a monopod. So you can totally kit this gimbal out, although most of the accessories, although they are really good and some of them are really useful, not all of them are essential necessary accessories, though the focus and zoom kit I reckon would be the best addition to the basic kit. The two servo motors they give are also slightly different. One of them is called the Lite and one of them is called the Max. Difference being the Max has a bit more torque than the Lite, so it also makes sense that Zhiyun's recommendation is to use the Max on the zoom ring and the Lite on the focus ring. So each of these are actually controlled and powered using the same single USB Type-C cable. The gimbal will also automatically identify which motor is the Lite and which motor is the Max, regardless of which way you plug them in. So by default, the control knob will always control the Lite and the zoom rocker will always control the Max. And I really do have to compliment Zhiyun on these servo controls because they are really responsive, they are precise, and they are incredibly smooth. I would highly recommend the focus and zoom accessories. And another one of my favorite accessories from the Creator Kit is this transmount quick release system. So it's made of two plates, it's got a male 1/4 inch thread on one side and a female one on the other side, and when you pull the release, they pop apart. So I've actually put one of mine between the gimbal and the tripod base, so I can pop the gimbal off the base without having to go through unscrewing the whole base, and I can pop it back on when I want to dock it. Easy as that. So that has pretty much been what I found different about the Crane 3 Lab compared to most other gimbals. But before I end this, I would also like to comment about a few minor things that I found to be pretty cool on this gimbal. This one's quite common, but there is a lock switch for every single axis, so you can lock the gimbal in place without it swirling around, which helps out a lot when you are balancing the gimbal, so you can go axis to axis. And the white bit around the focus controller is actually glow in the dark. I just thought I would point that out. And in terms of pricing for the Crane 3 Lab, it is $700 for the gimbal only, so it's not exactly a budget gimbal, but I wouldn't say it's awfully unaffordable either. For me, this gimbal has worked very well, and I am very happy with it, and it does its one job of stabilizing the camera really well, and I would say that this is one of the best gimbals that I have personally used. So if $700 for a gimbal fits your budget range, I would definitely recommend this as one of the options that you might want to consider. So that is it for today. If you enjoyed today's video, do consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon for more videos just like this, and I will see you in the next video. But until then, here's another one of my videos that YouTube thinks you should watch, or if you don't like a computer telling you what to watch, here's one of my latest videos.